Good evening, class. Week 4 is here. It's the second and last of those 4-chapter weeks. You made it through the first one. Those of you who aren't big fans of the mathy part of economics, this might be a tough week. But don't worry if you don't understand, especially in the last 2 chapters. If you don't totally grasp all the graphs and everything that go along with this, if you have the big picture kind of in mind, we'll be okay. So let's take a look here. Chapter 11 is kind of our big overview of macroeconomics. So here you're going to hear some terms that you are familiar with, talk about the business cycle and recessions and expansions and peaks and troughs. As of the printing here of this sheet here, you can see this trend that started really coming out of the Great Recession is still continuing today. We are in one of the longest expansion periods. We're really one of the longest periods of growth that we have had in quite some time. And then we'll talk a little bit about inflation and deflation and some of the reasons why price changes take place. Chapter 12 here is how we measure our output, which really how we measure GDP and some of the factors that go into it. The circular flow model comes in here. So you're going to scroll up here. This is what I was looking for. What consumers use and in the consumer markets and in the factor markets play together. It's also going to introduce value added, which is a good lead-in for the first discussion question, which we'll get to in a minute here. So make sure you pay attention in that section of Chapter 12. Chapter 13 here, we are looking at aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Aggregate, just total. So the total demand for all goods in a country, and then the total supply of those goods. And then it's going to talk a little bit about multipliers. There we go. Multipliers here and how investments can multiply many times over into future growth. And then speaking of growth, that is the 4th chapter, the rule of 72, which is also a cool just life rule. If you want to know how long it'll take to double your investment, 72 divided by whatever the interest rate is how long it'll take you to double your money. This takes the rule of 72 and applies it to economic growth, and then also looks at a little bit of per capita information here. Oh, my Dropbox is almost full, everyone. So our discussion questions here. The first one is the value-added tax, which is what is mentioned in Chapter 12. It's used quite a bit in Europe. It's not something that is currently used in the U.S. And so really it's, as you look at that, it's thinking about, would the VAT be a better system for collecting taxes in our country? One thing to keep in mind is, the VAT is really would be similar to what we have in sales taxes, which sales taxes are not currently collected at the federal level. So as you ponder, if we put in a VAT tax, what would it replace in your mind? Because to add it to the income taxes we already have would be a pretty significant increase in our financial burdens in terms of the taxes we pay. So that's one question to ponder. The second one has to do with comparing real GDP to GDP per capita. And I just want to show you here how to use this resource. The CIA World Factbook is our guide here. The link is in here. So if you go to, let's say, the United States, not Iceland, what is happening? Sorry. There we go, United States. And you're going to go down to the economy section. And for instance here, GDP, we are currently 19 trillion is the most recent estimate they have. And if you click here on the country comparison, you will get the list of the top 10. China sitting at 1 and the US sitting at 2. So you're going to look at this list and then you want to compare that to GDP per capita. So if I go back to the economy section, GDP per capita, you will see that we are 19th. And if we click on that number here, you will see, per capita, meaning you're taking the GDP of that country and dividing it by its population. So Liechtenstein, which I knew was the first guess you all would have had, according to this source here, which the CIA, we better trust them, has the highest GDP per capita. And as you look at this top 10 list and you start to research a little bit, you're going to find out what they do to be in the top 10. And it might be worth looking at, for instance, China is number 1 in GDP, but in GDP per capita, they're well down the list, probably halfway. And it tells you a little bit about, well, I don't want to give you away the answer because that's what you're going to write about. Your video review is, it's actually an assignment, I'm not lying, that I've stolen. I use it in my high school economics class. It's one of my favorite assignments we do in there and really gets you thinking about real GDP. So to do this, what we are looking at here, and I've got the 2 links here and I'm going to open them up here. This is worldwide box office grosses. So if we look at this list, these are all given to us in real dollars. So in real dollars, Avatar is number 1 all time. It was released in 2009, 2.78 billion. And remember, this is just box office, so this isn't DVD or VHS sales or pay-per-view or any of the merchandising that goes with it. This is just the money that the studio made from us going to the theater and seeing it. What you're going to do is put together the all-time list adjusted for inflation. So this, if you follow these hints, this is a half an hour most of time probably. Maybe 45 minutes. So I would suggest you take the first 15, 20 of these, and you need to adjust these all for inflation. Now, you're not going to have to do Avengers because Avengers is listed in, it's a current movie. So let's take Avatar, for instance. Avatar was released in 2009, 2.788 billion. And we're going to use an inflation calculator here, which it's doing all the math for the inflation for us. So I've got the year 2009, the 2788 in billions. If that movie were released today, we'd be looking at 3.3 billion. And you'll go to the next movie there. Again, Endgame, that number is current. That's 2019 dollars. So we go to Titanic, which was 2187, released in 1997. And if we adjust it for today, it's greater than Titanic. I'm sorry, greater than Avatar, 3.4 billion. So I would start by doing about the first 15 of these movies. Then what you want to do, because we are looking at how inflation affects it, is you want to look for old movies. And the secret here, if you go to the year column and you find this little caret symbol and you click on it twice, it will reorder all these movies oldest to newest. Skip this first one, by the way. I don't know what that is. So let's look at Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind made $402 million. It was released in 1939. So 1939, 402 million. Adjusted for inflation, in current dollars, Gone with the Wind would be a $7.3 billion movie. I'm telling you right now, that's number 1. And it's not that close between number 1 and number 2. So what I would then do is probably go through the 15 oldest movies here. So you're going to have a list of 30 movies then and then pull the top 10 out of that list. And so that's what your video is going to be, sharing that list. Oh, here it is. Sharing that list, and then comment on the need, why real GDP is as important as GDP as a tool for measuring our economy. And I understand that this one will probably be on the short side of the 2 to 3 minutes, and that's fine. Okay. And then your paper this week, for some of you, it's actually, and I should have done a better job in week 2 of making this clear. That's my fault. You're really looking at GDP, imports and exports, and growth levels. Some of you already wrote about that in the second week. So what you might do is end up pulling some of with the week 2 into this week 4. It'll leave your week 2 a little shorter. That's okay. We're not going to worry about it for this cohort. It's something I will address and clean up for the next time I do this course. Okay. Make sure you are looking at the comments that I've left on the first 2 sections, which are done. I hope to get the week 3 things back to you tomorrow. I am leaving Tuesday morning to go to DC for a week. Texting is definitely a better way if you need a quick answer, because we will be gone probably dawn to dusk each day, and then get back at night and spend some time in the course. So if you're working during the day and you have questions on something, please text me. You can email too, but text, you'll probably get a quicker response. I'm happy to help you on your journey. Remember, this is the last really hard week. You'll make it, I promise. Have a great week.